Hi, I just want to say I'm having an incredibly hard bout with my ADHD today lately. Don't want to overshare, but there's some things going on, so I'm really hoping I can articulate this well, but please forgive me if I don't. I'm trying my absolute best. So I'm going to talk about what I believe Erie's daughter represents in White Teeth. I think Erie's daughter is kind of an like she's probably the character that we know the absolute least about in this whole novel. I think she's arguably the most interesting, just based on what I believe she represents to the book as a whole. So let's just talk about her genetic makeup for a second, because I think cultural identity is a very large theme in this story. And of our it's hard to say there's a main character in this book because there's such specific amounts of time allotted to very many characters. We hear about Archie, we hear about Samad, we hear about Malat and uh Majid, Majid. We hear about Erie, we hear about Clara. I don't know if I already said that. We there's so many characters that we get to divulge into in this book, and for good reason, but I think their cultural identity of each of them individually is so important to the story. And if you look at the genetic makeup of this child, she is the daughter of Erie and one of Samad's twins. And that will make her half Bengali, a quarter white and a quarter black and Jamaican, which is kind of just the melting pot of all of the different ethnicities that are talked about in this story. As well, with that comes religion. Um, Samad and his family are very Muslim. Archie is non-religious, and Clara has ebbs and flows in Jehovah's Witness, which is a branch of Christianity. And then we even get Judaism in there a little bit, which is like covering it all, really. Not at all, but you know what I mean. There's talk of Sikh, there's talk of Hinduism. There's so much culture compounded into this book, which this could be a whole separate video, but I think with London being the setting makes so much sense because I've been fortunate enough to visit London, and there's just so much culture in that city, which I think in the time of this novel, like when it's set in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and like the whole 20th century, it's not as appreciated as it is nowadays. Which I think the quote that I'll talk about at the end kind of adds to that in a way. So, religion, I'm just going to briefly touch on this. We see so much of Samad's battle with his religion, particularly in the first quarter of the book, where he is struggling with his temptations with Poppy and what that means, and him using his religion, him talking to his God in a way where he can wager with him, where if I do this, I won't do this. If I do this, I won't do this, and all that. And him not really taking other religions seriously, him using Christianity as almost a dig, where he feels like he's being Anglican when he's not doing his service to his religion. Um, that leads to the way he raises his sons. He wants them to be very proud of their culture. He doesn't want them to get whitewashed. He wants them to be proud Muslims. Um, to the point where he ends up splitting them up, sending one to Bengali, one being raised in London, and you see the very different ways that affects the people they become. We see Claire's relationship with religion, where when we first meet her, she's a devout Jehovah's Witness, and in that, it leads her to meet Ryan, which in turn leads her to meet Archie. And after they're married and she has her daughter, she comes back to it, which affects the way that Erie thinks about religion. And yeah, and then we have Joshua, who is Jewish, who adds more to the character that is and would become, if the book were to continue, Erie's daughter. So, so I'm going to talk about this quote from the last chapter. Um, Erie's child can never be mapped exactly nor spoken of with certainty. Some secrets are permanent. In a vision, Erie has seen a time not far from now, when roots won't matter anymore because they can't, because they mustn't, because they're too long and they're too torturous and they're just buried too damn deep. She looks forward to it. I love that last part. I just think it's very lyrical, talking about how when her daughter grows up, who it it won't not matter in a way where it's not important, but it's as important as she wants to make it. If she doesn't like, she doesn't want society to make it a whole ordeal around her. She wants her to be accepted for who she is and not who she is as a human more than who she is genetically. And this book ends in the 90s. And I think I was born in the early 2000s, but I still think the amount of acceptance that we've grown to since then, but even then compared to like when Clara Hedhurst came to London, is vast. And so yeah, so I think Erie's Daughter just really represents the whole book, and it is a beautiful little bow at the end of the story. I don't think the story is completely tied up in any sense. I love the open interpretations you can have, but I think it was a beautiful addition to the ending of the story. Thank you. I hope that was okay.